You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 27.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial by visiting borntokickarse.com/audible. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to borntokickarse.com/audible. Again, that's borntokickarse.com/audible for your free audiobook. Adam Walker is only the fifth person to successfully swim the Ocean 7, the toughest 7-channel swims in the world, including the English Channel. He did that with a torn bicep. The Strait of Gibraltar, where he did a double crossing. The Molokai Strait. The Catalina Channel. The Tsugaru Strait. Cook Strait, and the North Channel. The Ocean 7 is the equivalent to mountaineering's 7 summits, and Adam is the second person in history to complete all 7 on the first attempt. In this interview, Adam shares his experiences, including suffering hypothermia, being stung and paralysed by a Portuguese Man O War, and being protected from a shark by a pod of dolphins. Enjoy the interview. Adam Walker, thanks for your time today and welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Nice to be here.
Now, you are you were the fifth person and one of only 6 people on Earth who have completed the Ocean 7. Can you tell us what is the Ocean 7?
So it's the toughest, deadliest 7 ocean swims in the world. So a man called Steve Munatones, who's the ex-US open water swimming coach, said these are the 7 toughest in the world, trying to get the equivalent of the mountaineering 7 summits. That was why the challenge was born. And he's very well respected, so kind of what he says goes, really. So he said these are the toughest. He's been around for years, and he selected them.
Like, I have heard of the 7 summits, but yeah, I'd never actually heard of this, the Ocean 7.
Yeah, it's pretty new. 2010, I think it was born.
So were you always a swimmer? Can you maybe give us a background on yourself, like where you grew up, and were you always a swimmer growing up, or if not, how did you sort of get into it?
Yeah, I mean, I played loads of sports as a kid. I come from a place called Nottingham in England, and as a kid I dreamt of being a professional athlete, going to the Olympics, and like a lot of kids played cricket, rugby, football, swimming. Swimming was always the sport I could do best out of all of them, but no one really cared about swimming in England, and I'm talking about pool swimming. And I played cricket for quite a high standard county, up to under 19s, but I had lots of injuries. So at 13, I had my first injury, I had an operation on my knee, 16, 18, etc. And I looked promising pool swimmer at the age of, 12, 13, 14. But once I got the injuries, it really kind of held me back. And I carried on with the swimming, and it was 50 metres backstroke. It was never front crawl, it was never long distance. But when I was 16, I entered the county championships, the district championships, and I was in the final. And when I went to turn, I couldn't kick off the wall with my knee because I'd had this knee problem. And it was the first realization that I wouldn't make it as a professional because of the body. And then I had back problems and all sorts of things. But every time I got injured as a kid, I went back into swimming. That was like my go-to sport. at school. But as soon as I was fit enough, I'd focus again on, the team sports, rugby and cricket and all the sports that people are interested in. So it was always there. But it was never open water. It was always pool. It was always backstroke. And then what happened was I went to university. I had a big gap, 2 or 3 years. Didn't really do much sport. Played still a bit of cricket, but forgot the swimming. And then I entered the student nationals to do 50 meters backstroke. And to be honest, I entered it because the coach persuaded me that there would be some free drinks and that would be in a nice hotel. And it was kind of that, sort of student mentality, really. And I got to the final of the student nationals without much training of the 50 backstroke. And then it kind of hit me of what I could have been. And at this point, I'm 20. And I had this gap, as I say, of probably 3 or 4 years of not really doing much. And I was still playing the cricket. But after the student nationals, I had a good 7 to 8 year gap of no swimming. Played a little bit of water polo, but I played in goal. So it wasn't really much swimming out. And that's how it started, really. I then kind of thought, well, swimming had gone, had finished. And then I got on an aeroplane and I was going to Australia, funnily enough, and I put this movie on and it's called On a Clear Day. And I read the brief on it and it said, it's about a man who goes on to swim the English Channel looking for inspiration. So he loses his job after 35 years. It was a fiction movie. And it's a real feel-good movie. It's a Scottish movie. And it resonated with me. And I was doing a sales job that, I kind of wasn't that bothered about. And I thought success was, becoming a sales director and being successful in work, in business. But something always felt wrong. And my degree was in sports science, but I fell into sales. My whole family are in sales. And as I kind of went up the ranks in sales, I thought, okay, I've achieved being sales director, but, if you're not, something isn't quite right here, and I'm not sure what it is. And it was always a reminder of what I could have been, really, in my head. And I thought, when I have kids and get older, am I going to be one of these people who say, I could have been this and I could have been that if I wasn't injured, which, of course, there's lots of people out like that. So once I watched this movie, I thought, okay, well, the two things I wasn't good at was front crawl and long distance. But swimming was always, the go-to sport and was always the thing that I could do when I was injured. So I thought, what the hell, let's give it a go. I didn't have a coach. I didn't have any real guidance. And in 2006, when there was not really much of it. There wasn't like a big trail of training plans or guidance. And so I thought, well, the first port of call is to jump in a pool and see how capable I am. That kind of makes sense. So I jumped in a pool after I got back from Australia, swam for 45 minutes non-stop, and was really too tired, was coughing my guts up, and why am I doing this sport? I'm never, ever going to get to the standard to swim 21 miles, and that's outside. This is like 29-degree pool. But the stubbornness of which I've always had, that kind of discipline to push myself in whatever it is, I went in again before work, and work was 100 miles away. So I'd get in early, drive 100 miles to work. And that week I did 3 sessions, and then the next week 4 sessions. And I just got in my head that that's what I need to do, swim the English Channel. It was almost like a redemption from the injuries that I had and, what I could have been. So I carried on. And after 5 months, I managed to do 5 hours in the pool non-stop. So I went from sort of lane swimming to public swimming to family swimming, and everyone was looking at me like I was some sort of strange person. And then I started to believe, well, hang on, maybe I could do this. But what I should also explain is I had a bad shoulder just before training. I took a save in water polo, and it made like a cracking noise, my shoulder. And I thought, oh, God, another injury. But I sort of made my deal with the ocean gods, or, looked up at the sky and said, look, please let me get across this. I'll just do this one thing. If you give me that, I'll never do this sport again. Just give me that one moment in the sun with all the injuries that I've had, type of thing. So what I had to do through the training was kind of manage my swim stroke. And because I hadn't swam for so long, I had to get the breathing right. And I was a qualified coach from the age of 18. And at this point, I'm 28. So probably to some people too old to take it on. And but for me, I was just kind of fiddling with the stroke to try and take pressure off the shoulder. But after I did 5 hours in the pool, it started to hurt a little bit more. But then, of course, I haven't been outside, so I haven't got used to 15 degrees, which is what the English Channel is. This is 29 degrees. So at this point, it's February, not the smartest time to go outside. But I managed with my sales skills to convince the local lake to let me in. And at this point, no one was swimming in that lake, let alone in February. And the guy said, "Look, Adam, there's frost on the ground. It's February." And I was like, "Nah, I'm really experienced. Don't worry. Know what I'm doing," and managed to convince him to let me go in. And also, I thought, well, look, you're going to have to commit to it at some point. So I actually booked the English Channel before I even had gone outside as a driving force to make sure that I get it right. And anyway, when I arrived there, it was 9 degrees, the water temperature. And I thought naively, well, great, if it's 9 degrees, the English Channel's 15. If I can cope with this, I can cope with the English Channel. But I didn't really have a plan of how long I was going to swim for. And the training sets that I developed in the pool, because I started in the pool of just swimming nonstop 45 minutes, then went on to an hour, and then it turned into proper training sets when I felt that I was fit enough. Well, outside, I didn't have a plan at all. I just thought, just swim until, you can't swim anymore. And of course, in 9 degrees, that doesn't work. So anyway, I slipped into the water, gasped for breath. My lungs felt like closing in on me, start hyperventilating. And I got to about 1,000 meters. It took me 500 meters to put my face in. And then after I got to about a K, I started to lose feeling in my feet, my legs, my arms were getting heavier, my face. And when I got to a mile, everything slowed down. I was getting paranoid. My friend was walking on the side. I was like, why aren't they walking level with me? What are they doing? I was getting really irritated, which isn't like me. And then fortunately for me, they brought a safety boat out with me, obviously thinking, why have we let this idiot, come out into the water, because no one swims in February in England. And anyway, I managed to do the full length of the lake, which was 2 kilometers. And the guy spoke to me and said, "Are you okay?" And I went to swim back. My friend said, "Look, just get in the boat." And I said, no, I'm okay. And fortunately, something in my brain said, "Look, you're not okay here." And I got bundled into the boat, and my face and mouth was so frozen, I wasn't making any sense at all. And they rushed me back in the rib back to the clubhouse. And I remember them trying to get the warm shower on, and it wasn't working. It was probably only 10 seconds, but it felt like forever. And I looked at my face in the mirror, and it was like a yellowy grey colour. And it was just like I looked like a ghost. And 5 paramedics were called. And after 40 minutes of a lukewarm shower, I could gradually see the kind of red patches on my body where the blood was trying to get back to the extremities and warm me up. And I was shivering uncontrollably. I couldn't remember where I lived. They asked me where I lived, and I could just about remember my name if I thought about it. And my core temperature was 34.9, and anything under 35 is hypothermic. And that was after 45 minutes of a warm shower. But, I always tell that story because it was a lesson really, in the fact of giving that sport the respect it deserved. But also I could have given it up as a bad job, and I probably would have been forgiven for giving it up as a bad job and just think, what have you done? You were never equipped to do this. But actually it made me more determined to give it the respect it deserved, wait till it was warmer and train and properly and, gradually build up to it. So that's what I did. I waited until it was August. So this is now February, went to Dover. And the next time I went in, it was 15 degrees, but it's the only time I've ever been nervous in the ocean. And this is like my first proper ocean training session. Obviously we all go in the ocean, on holiday, but this is like a proper swimming training session. And the plan was to do 20 minutes and swim with a more experienced swimmer. So she went in with me and just disappeared. I didn't know where she went. So I just kept swimming, and I did 3.5 hours before I thought, well, surely I'm supposed to come in for a drink or something. And eventually I came in after 3.5 hours and felt a lot more confident from, stepping in the water to then kind of burying the demons. But that was difficult at the start. And then the third session I did a 6 hour. So the kind of first one was hypothermic, nearly died. Second one, 3.5 hours. Third one, 6 hours. So after that, I thought, well, actually, this really is possible now. And you have to do a 6 hour swim without a wetsuit, goggles, one swim hat, can't be neoprene, it has to be silicone or latex, and normal size swim trunks or shorts. That's the rules. So when you do a 6 hour, you're officially qualified really to do it. So from that, gave me a lot of confidence. But I went through many training sessions, many 6 hour sessions, and they were never easy. I mean, giving you one example, I remember 13 degrees, the temperature was. So it was the following year, this time 2008, when I actually did the English Channel. And I remember being sick, shivering uncontrollably, having a nosebleed, a headache, all at the same time. So I was kind of sick, nosebleed, shivering, headache from dehydration, and it was just all happening at once. And I needed the toilet from stomachache because the cold can do that. So it was like everything was just hitting me, and I was 3 hours into the swim, and I was literally breaking down in the water. But I thought, if I quit in training, I'll get used to quitting on the day. So I mustn't quit in training. So I used the training as like it was the real thing every time. So anyway, after those 3 hours, I kind of looked at the shore and thought, do I go in? What do I do? And anyway, the harbour wall's about 1.2 kilometres away in Dover. And I thought, well, I'll get to the harbour wall and come in. And then at least I've done 3.5 hours. So I did harbour wall. As I turned, I thought, well, I may as well go to the other wall and do 4 hours. So I got to the wall and did 4 hours. And when I did 4 hours, I thought, well, I may as well do another half hour. And I kept incentivising myself, for short-term wins. And all those short-term wins, I got to 6 hours. And I remember going in the car, and I was just in disbelief how I did it. And that was only training. And then I'm in the car, head in the hands, shaking. I looked at my watch, and in 14 hours' time, I was going to do another 5 hour, which was really tough to get, in your head. But I always talk about winning habits and getting into completing everything you set out to do, because if you do that, then your brain tells you, you can do it, whatever you go through. So I knew that I couldn't give up.
With these 4, 5, 6 hour training swims, how did you manage fluid intake? Do you have like a drink bottle, or how did you just take heaps of fluids on board before commencing, or did you drink during? How did you manage that?
Well, you always have a good breakfast. So always a big breakfast and get plenty of carbs, porridge, lots of fuel. In terms of drink, I would fuel on the 2 hour, and then every hour after that, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour, 5 hour. And I would come into the shore, try and keep my shoulders underwater, and a bottle would be thrown to me, which was a carbohydrate drink it as fast as I could, and then go back out again, so you weren't hanging around. You don't want to hang around from the temperature anyway, but also on the day in the English Channel, the current's moving, so you train yourself to drink it quick and then move on. So that's how you fuel. But yeah, 2000. At this point, it was in 2008. So the season 2008, which starts in May, and it's sort of 11 degrees and goes up to kind of 12, 13 in June. And then, and then I took it on July. And I tried to do it July the 9th, which was my 30th birthday. And I was scheduled in for July the 10th. And the weather was so bad, I actually drove back in belting rain, wind and everything on my 30th birthday. And all I thought was, God, everyone else is getting drunk and on their 30th and doing something else, and I'm driving back from Dover in the pouring rain. And then I waited a week with my stuff packed. I went back to work. So I was selling kettles and toasters, electrical appliances for a company called Russell Hobbs, and went back and then just was looking at my stuff in the lounge, waiting for the call and for the conditions to calm down. And then July the 13th, I spoke to him, and he said, weather's 50-50. What do you want to do? And I said, well, can you give me anything stronger than that? And he said, well, no, it might get worse in the afternoon. It might be okay in the morning. And wasn't really that clear because it's unpredictable, the conditions. So 9 o'clock at night, I thought, sod it. Well, I'll just go to Dover. So got the dogs in the kennels and normal and family life, and then went off to Dover. Arrived at midnight, had about 5 hours sleep, and arrived at the harbour. And sun was out, everything looked great. But obviously, it's not a true reflection in the harbour. When you start to get out to do it, it's not quite the same. So anyway, got greased up, Vaseline under the arms and back of the shoulder, which is the preparation you do for going in. There's nothing keeps you warm. It's a myth, this goose fat.
Is it?
It just, adds weight to the body, and it blocks the pores, and it doesn't do anything apart from just kind of add weight. All you need is a bit of grease, which can be Vaseline for friction for your neck and shoulders. So if you're doing, let's say, 70 to 80,000 swim strokes in the English Channel, then you can rub your neck and it can be sore. Also between your legs can get sore as well with salt water. So I put that back of the neck and shoulders, one swim hat, one pair of goggles, normal swim shorts. You can't have 3/4 shorts. They're classed as too long, and they won't ratify it if you wear 3/4 shorts. So you have to do it like Captain Webb did it in 1872, who's the first person to swim the English Channel, which was swim trunks, no wetsuit. But I always joke, say, well, there's no wetsuits around when Captain Webb did this channel, so this is a bit harsh. But that's how you have to do it. So anyway, I jumped in, and you swim there's two beaches, one called Shakespeare Beach in Dover, one called Samphire Hoe. And I went from Shakespeare Beach. That's the starting point to swim the English Channel. And the boat moors up about 100 yards, 150 yards before going to ground. You jump off and you swim to the shore, put the hands up in the air, and then off you go. So that's what I did. Sirens goes off, started about 8 in the morning. And as I pushed off, I thought, what the hell have I agreed to do here? About to swim the bloody English Channel. Why did I think I could possibly do this? And but all the time I'm trying to keep the demons at bay. And all the way in training, I actually saw a hypnotherapist because I was getting more and more of a sore shoulder. And then towards the end, I had to manage the training. Like if I did the 6 hour on a Saturday, 5 hours on a Sunday, in the end I had to have 4 or 5 days of nothing. And other people training were doing it every day. But because my shoulder was so swollen and sore, it was the only way, that I could get back in the water at the weekend to do the long ones. So I had to deal with that mentally, which wasn't easy. So I saw a hypnotherapist, which at the time I didn't know what a hypnotherapist did. I kind of thought, well, am I going to look at a watch and they're going to turn me into a dog or a chicken or something? So I thought, is it a bit mumbo jumbo? But anyway, I was recommended by my physio, who I was seeing twice a week just to get back in the pool for the shoulder. And he said, what's the problem? I said, well, the shoulder. He said, what's the problem? I said, I'm just worried, what if it goes on the day? And anyway, he would chat about me. And as I was talking to him, I was touching the shoulder. And he said, can I ask you, why do you keep touching the shoulder? And I said, well, want you to know how sore it is. And he said, every time you touch it, you give it power over you. So next time we talk about it, I don't want you to touch it. So anyway, he brought it up a few minutes later and he said, so tell me about your shoulder again. I went to touch it and realized what he said, and then kind of dropped my hand towards the floor, and he just started laughing. And he said, look, just get in a habit of not giving it power over you. So this kind of makes sense to me. And he said the other thing as well, to not talk about it, because that also gives you power over it. Just say it's great, it's absolutely fine, and get into those habits. So I started doing that. And that really worked very well, because whenever anyone said, how's the shoulder? I'd just say, yeah, it's really good, thanks, it's great. And I didn't give it any strong association over me. So when I trained, I knew it was there, but it wasn't going to make the difference to overpower me. I was in control of my own destiny, was the thought process. So anyway, so going back to the actual English Channel, when I'm swimming, I'm keeping all these thoughts at bay, these negative thoughts. And what I call the devil on your shoulder, the angel and the devil, we all have it as endurance swimmers, trying to tell you to quit. Well, in this, I had my shoulder and the temperature and the fact of I didn't know how capable what I was in terms of carrying on unassisted. So I'm just trying to keep all these thoughts at bay and just think about my technique and tell myself positive affirmations. So I'm strong, I'm a winner, I'm powerful, I'm swimming downhill, and then focus on how it will feel when I'm achieve my goal. So nothing but positive thoughts. And what the hypnotherapist taught me was, why are you thinking positive? You can't think negative. So why are you thinking you're strong? You can't be weak. Why are you thinking you're warm? You can't be cold. And I can't even say it now, that word, because I disassociated it in my mind because it was negative. So I never said it. And even when I talk about it now, it just doesn't want to come out, cold. And I've recently written a book called Man versus Ocean. And when I was writing the book, I was putting an asterisk on the O all the way through the book. I thought, this is ridiculous. People are going to think, what on earth, is this word that he keeps? Because, why is he putting an asterisk there? So to clear all that up, my first line of my book is, I mention the word cold throughout this book. However, it doesn't exist in my mind, and so it doesn't exist in reality. And if you are an open water swimmer, I suggest you also erase it from your mind. Happy swimming is kind of my first line to the book. But as I carried on, I got to about 2.5 hours of just thinking about the stroke, thinking positively, saying lots of positive thoughts. And then before I've trained, saying warm, hot, 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 warm, warm, hot, warm, hot. I've done 6 hours just saying warm, hot with each arm, just so I don't allow the cold word in my head. And anyway, I got to the 2.5 hours, everything was looking good. And then it started to chop up the conditions. And it was like I was swimming in a washing machine. And as I went out, I started to be sick, and I was sick constantly for the next 2 hours. And it's funny how thoughts go into your head. People, I call them emotional vampires. Some people will say to you, you can't do it, or aren't you worried about this or worried about that? And, that goes to the shoulder and everything else. What if this? What if you don't make it? What if, and all these concerns. And they're called emotional vampires. And for me, I remember a guy telling me you burn 1,000 or up to 1,100 calories an hour when doing open water swimming if you're pushing yourself. When you have a drink, and actually on the day I had a drink first hour, second hour, and every half hour after that to get the fuel. And every half hour, a drink tied to a piece of strings thrown overboard from the boat, the safety boat, and you get around 300 calories every time you drink a 500ml bottle of carb drink. So every hour you're getting 600, so you're losing 500. But when you're sick, you're losing 1,100. And I was fueling on carb drinks, and I was just all the way through on carbs, so I wasn't fueling on fats, and that's a different conversation for this. But so I was kind of just burning my body, really. And this for that 2.5 hours, my brain suddenly went into turmoil and went, you can't do it. It's impossible. You've not got enough fuel in your system. So then the devil got really big on the shoulder and said, well, you're finished. And even though I'd done lots of 6 hour, maybe 7 or 8 6-hour swims and 1 7-hour swim, at this point I'm 4.5 hours in and it's finished. And then I went, hang on, just get control of your thoughts here. You've finished every training session. You're used to winning and finishing. Let's think about this. I looked at the boat and I thought about a charity, Whale and Dolphin Conservation, that people had raised a lot of money, contributed a lot of money for. And I thought about my father, and I could see his face. And when I was a kid, he used to say, don't give up, give it everything you got, son. I could see his face saying, don't give up. And then I just didn't give myself a choice. I thought, well, if the boat wasn't there, you'd swim to France if you had to do it to save your life. And if you had to do it to save family, that's what you would do. So just don't give yourself a choice. So I cleared my mind and carried on. I got to 8.5 hours in, and I come into the boat. How long to go? And the co-pilot said 3 miles. Now, the one thing you should never tell someone when they're swimming the English Channel is how long they've got to go, particularly the 3-mile buoy, because that's when it can push you sideways with the tide. Tide's going every sort of 6 hours, but, current and tide's unpredictable. So even though I knew that, my brain went, well, brilliant, 3 miles, that's 3 feeds, 3 drinks. So first one, drink, second one, came in at third one. How long to go? 3 miles. So I hadn't gone anywhere basically, or well, I had gone somewhere, but what had happened is the wind was up to 18 knots, and the Cap Grenade, which is the shortest point where the rocks are, where people generally finish, we'd missed it, which meant I had to do another 3 miles onto Wisson Beach. So it was very gutting, and it was the first time I went, oh no. And then they all told me to shut up on the boat and carry on. So that's what I did. I was a bit gutted being told to shut up because they told me 3 miles an hour and a half before. And I was like, oh, hang on, you said 3 miles before. Anyway, carried on. Just thought to myself, just ignore how long it is. Just it's one arm in front of the other until you get to the side. So I carried one arm in front of the other, 9 hours, 10 hours, 11 hours. And then I could feel the water getting thinner on my hand. And the beach looked like where Frank in the film On a Clear Day finished. So it was like I was reliving the film. And I got within 5 meters of finishing, and I stood up, and in the film, Frank falls backwards, and I stood up and fell backwards for no apparent reason. Exactly like the film. I must have watched it 200 times. And I thought, well, that's a bit embarrassing. Why don't you just walk out? You don't need to fall back. So I kind of crawled to my feet, got out on the beach, and a French family came over and said, have you just swam from England? I said, I don't know. They said, well, I think you have. I said, you sure? And they went, yeah. I said, oh, maybe I have then. And there's this picture somewhere that they took of me propped up in the middle of them, looking like a zombie. And anyway, I made it, 11 hours, 35 minutes. And then I thought, well, what happens now? And I swam back to the boat, which I didn't think you'd have to do, but I swam back to the boat. And the euphoria of it was amazing. And it lasted for about a week, went back to work. My shoulder was so sore. And I'd made my deal before that with the ocean gods of, if you let me get across this, I'll never do this sport again. And after a week, I thought, well, maybe I might be quite good at this. And like all the other sports I've had to quit, I don't want to quit this one. So I thought, well, get a scan on your shoulder. Had a scan, didn't show a problem. So then the surgeon said, maybe it's stretched tendons. So anyway, I went in the gym, spent 15 months in the gym, did no swimming, and thought, no, it still hurts. So we decided to have an operation, and it turns out I had a partial rupture of the bicep tendon. And in those 15 months, it tried to heal itself and attached to another tendon. And he just said to me, it's in a real mess. He said, do you ever want to swim again? I said, yeah, I want to swim from Spain to Morocco. And he laughed hysterically. He said, no, I mean for leisure. You won't be doing that again. And I said, well, yeah, Spain to Morocco is leisure for me. And he just sort of shook his head. And he said, well, if you want to swim again, we'll have to have 6 weeks in a sling, 2 weeks mobilization, make sure it's healed, and then check it again. So that's what we did. After 8 weeks, checked it again. It had stuck back to, he put it back to the shoulder, but it was still stuck to this other tendon. And he alluded to the fact it might be 65, 70% fit. And he said it's been, and when a surgeon says partial success in an operation, it's never a good sign because they want to say full success. So he put partial success, and by trying to unstick both tendons, he caused a tear down my arm, and there was another problem that he had to fix, which was in the report. So I was pretty stuffed, really. Don't stand up more upright, you're going to get a bad back at 14. But I ignored them because I was effective. And when I ran flat-footed and advised to swim more, to run more on my toes, and ignored that. So all this advice I ignored because I was, decent standard at it. So I thought, well, you're going to have to strip it back. So anyway, I started looking at sports like golf, which is hips, shot put, which is hips, javelin, which is hips, climbing, hips, kayaking, boxing. They all come power from the core, from the hips. So when I used to teach kids to swim, certain things didn't make sense to me, like being flat, really flat in the water, not moving the hips. But of course, the textbook says, you swim flat, you swim your chest and shoulders. That's how it works. So I wasn't sure about it in the past, but I followed suit. But I thought, well, hang on. If all these sports on land come from hip rotation, and hip rotation creates power, why does it make a difference in the water? Why do we then suddenly forget about the hips and just drag our torso through the water with the shoulders and chest? And the other thing, there's a number of things that didn't make sense. When I was teaching kids and part of the coaching program, they say, put the chin on top of the water, hold the flow, point your toes. But when your head's up, the head's the heaviest part of the body. So the head's up, the body drops, and the legs drop. So the only way you can then bring your legs up, if you bring the ankles up, you have an arch in the middle of your back and you cause a bad back. So that's why a pull buoy was invented. A pull buoy helps get your hips up. But if your head's up and you use a pull buoy and your feet come up, you get an arch in the middle of the back. So I thought, well, if we drop our head down, then the hips will come up automatically. Magic. Well, no, actually physics. So I started thinking about a deeper head to bring the hip up. I then thought, if I'm on my side, I've got less mass going through the water, less body mass. So fish are created on their side for a reason. They're not flat, flat like us. So you have less body mass going through the water. And then I thought, if I can rotate from one side to the other, in a sort of fish-like motion, like a dolphin motion, then the rotation should create momentum, and momentum creates glide, which is like a free push. So I thought I've got to learn to swim a more efficient way, and the rotation made sense because you've got less mass going through the water. Sorry, can you hear that back? There's banging there.
Yeah, that's all good.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, yep.
So swimming from side to side, less mass going through the water, and by rotating from side to side, you create momentum, and momentum creates glide. And that's why shot putter drives his back hip. That's why javelin thrower, they throw, they run and then launch the back hip. And that's why, again, with kayaking, rotates before they pull. So it takes pressure off the shoulder, generates more power, which means I'm doing now less strokes than I was before. Actually 1,200 strokes less per hour, but I'm actually faster now than I was before. But anyway, I go to book Gibraltar Straits. It's 10 miles. English Channel is 21 miles. So I think, well, this stroke's so effective, maybe I can swim there and back. And no British person swam there and back, and only 5 in the world. And I didn't look into the detail as why only 5 people have gone there and back, and it was because the current's twice as fast in your face on the way back, which means that you have to go under 3.5 hours one way to have a chance of going back. And I said, what's the British record? And he said 3.5 hours. So I had to break the British record basically in order to come back. And that's what happened. I swam as fast as I could one way, managed to touch the side in 3 hours, 25 minutes. And on the way back, it took me 6 hours, 15 minutes. And I was getting pushed out to the Atlantic, but fortunately I was far enough across before the current started pushing me, and I made it in 9 hours, 39 minutes. Heard a pilot whale calling to another pilot whale and a couple of dolphins, and quite an amazing experience. But, I went through so many different emotions in that swim that I'm going to make it, I'm not going to make it, I'm going to make it, I'm not going to make it. And then in the end, I thought, definitely not going to make it. And then the boat moored up and said, there's a rock there, touch it and you're finished. So it was really a roller coaster of, because I kept being told to swim faster and faster because the current was taking me after 6 hours. So a lot of pressure there. But, that was Europe, Africa and back again. And now I've done 2. And I think, well, I can pack in there. And then I hear about this thing called the Ocean 7 comes out, the toughest 7 ocean swims in the world. And I think, well, I've done 2 of them on the list. Maybe I can get another one in there. Now, at this point, I'm not realistically thinking I can get another 5 21-mile swim plus under my belt with this shoulder that's been attached back and had 2 operations. But I thought, let's give it a go. And on that list was Molokai Straits in Hawaii, which is a 26-mile swim, longest of the Ocean 7. But the good thing about this was it's warmer water. It's Hawaii. How bad can it be, was my thought. Anyway, I did an 18-hour flight, arrived, and literally 24 hours later, I was on the boat ready to swim. I should have had at least 4 days wait, but the weather was so bad, he said, we need to go tomorrow, otherwise all week, we're not going to have a chance of making it. So we went 24 hours later, and there's different time zone difference and 18-hour flight, but I thought, let's go for it. So anyway, got on the boat, slid in the water, off I go. And this was about 6 a.m. But we met at 3 a.m, and I thought I was going to go in straight away. And as I went to go in, he said, no, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm about to start. He said, no, can't start now because of the sharks. I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it's dark, it's Pacific Ocean. We have to wait till the light comes up to have a better chance with the sharks. I thought, oh God, he's mentioning sharks now. Because before the swim, I Googled Molokai Straits and it came up with about 3 pages of shark attacks. So I thought, I won't Google that again. I'll try and ignore it. And anyway, I met this guy in Hawaii. I'd emailed him and he designed this shark unit, which was like anti-shark device. Lets off a sonar that's supposed to keep the sharks at bay. And it's like smelling salts for sharks, basically, so it doesn't harm them. And I'm big on conservation, so that's important for me. So anyway, when we did slip in at 6 a.m. with this unit on, I swam to the start, off I went. And I remember swimming the first 2 hours thinking, what have I agreed to do here? I'm absolutely knackered. I've had 18-hour flight. 24 hours later, I'm in the water. And I got to a couple of hours, had a bit of flat Coke to sort of settle myself. And I tend to have a bit of flat Coke if I feel really sick. Don't want to have too much of it because the caffeine boost gives you a big drop. But I had it to settle myself. I got to 4 hours, was feeling a lot better actually. And then at 6 hours, my friend jumped in and he's allowed to swim for sort of an hour and a half, but he can't touch me, he has to swim behind me. Anyway, he's in about 10 minutes and he starts looking down. I thought, what's he looking at? And he just kept looking down the whole time. And then shortly afterwards, got back on the boat. And I said, you're all right, mate? He says, yeah, I just got a bit of cramp. And obviously he was back on the boat for a reason, and because he'd been looking at a shark underneath us. And anyway, after 6 hours, carried on, got to 8 hours, and the light on my shark unit, because it's like Velcro around your ankle, and it weighs about 1 kilo, this thing, and you can feel a bit of the electrical impulse. But anyway, it had gone red, which meant that it wasn't working anymore. The battery had run out. So I come into the boat saying it's not working anymore, shout to the crew, pass me another one. But what I don't realise is it activates when it hits water. So as soon as it's passed in the water, I'm starting to electrocute myself because I hold it right where the electrical impulse is coming out of. So I start shaking in the water, going, what's wrong? I'm going, give me a minute, as I'm shaking in the water. And but I've got to say, it did wake me up after that. And managed to get it on my ankle. It was quite loose. Every time I fiddled with it, I kept giving myself electric shocks. I thought, just ignore it. And then I heard the guy on the next feed, after 9 hours, say, look, it's going to break the world record. And the world record was 12 hours. And only 10 people had ever crossed it. And I was heading for like 10 and a half hours, 3 miles to go. So I went as fast as I could, thinking I'm going to this is relatively simple. And then as soon as I thought that, the ocean gods had their say, and I got pushed back 3 hours. No, it went nowhere. And then I got pushed back sideways another 2 hours, and that's 5 hours. And then suddenly it's going dark. And I remember what he said when it goes dark. And this guy gets really worried when it's dark. And apparently any other swimmer who hadn't made it by the time it was dark, he got out. But I was so close, so he kept me in. And he sent a kayaker in with me to, for sharks to look at and try and keep me safe. I had a light stick attached to my trunks with a piece of string. I turned that off not to attract the sharks. And then within 2 minutes, bang, I'm hit with the most pain that I've ever had in my life. And it felt like I was going to shoot out the water. And anyway, it turned out to be a Portuguese Man O War. Didn't know what it was at the time. The kayaker just said, oh, it's either a box jellyfish or Portuguese Man O War. So anyway, I'm feeling my stomach and I pulled tentacles off my stomach. And I start to lose feeling in my spine, and I'm yelling in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And I as I put in my book, I put like the devil and the angel. I trained myself so much to not show pain and give pain power over me, but it was almost like I couldn't help it. It's almost like it took over the pain, and it was like it wasn't part of me. I was like yelling even though I didn't want to yell because I didn't want the part to get me out. Anyway, they passed me an antihistamine pill. I started to be sick. I was sick for 7 or 8 minutes. And the kayaker says, oh, that's good. That's probably the poison coming out of you. Because he says it's either a box jellyfish, Portuguese Man O War. If you start to labour breathe, I've got to get you out. And I thought, well, I'm labour breathing now, but I have been swimming 13 and a half hours. So what's the difference? So anyway, the brain's going, you're finished. And I thought, well, hang on. Let's just give myself a minute of swimming. Everybody can do something for a minute, no matter how much pain they're in. So I tried to drag my torso forward, and I'm not even swimming properly. My legs are going down towards the seabed, and I'm in a lot of pain. And every swim stroke, I'm touching my stomach because it's sizzling. It feels like being scolded by a kettle times 1,000. I managed to do about 30 seconds, stopped, regrouped my head again, tried again, stopped again. It was no good. It was useless. And the guy says, "Oh, dude, you've got about an hour to go," as if to say, we're not going to make it. I said, "Just give me a minute." And then I made a third deal with myself. If you can get level with the boat, that's like a checkpoint to continue. So the boat's 30 meters ahead of me. That's kind of moored up. They're expecting me to quit. And I managed to shift myself 30 meters towards the boat. They all leaned forward thinking I'm going to to get me out. And I smiled at them, which was more like a grimace. And that was to offset the pain. And then I thought, right, now we're going to see how capable you are. Now we're going to see how much this means to you, because this is a lesson. It was never going to be easy. And I thought to myself at that point, you imagine if you can get through this, what swim will ever stop you again? But an hour, seemed like a hell of a long time. I could barely do a minute. So I counted 60 strokes for an hour to keep my mind occupied. And I was thinking positive thoughts like strong power, strong power. But every time I put strong in my mind, the pain overtook it and just said, "You're in agony again." So I had to problem solve and try and work through it. And I managed to do an hour, but I was nowhere near finishing. I was like still further away. I was going sideways. So an hour and a half went by, 2 hours went by. And I remember him saying, "In 5 minutes, you can stand up, you're finished." Or maybe that was hallucination, or maybe I just wanted him to say that, because when I tried to stand up, to this day, I was nowhere near finishing. So I just don't know whether I invented it in my head. And I got to 3 hours, and then eventually 3.5 hours later, swimming with this pain, I was faced with some rocks. And the kayaker said to me, "Just follow me, it's too dangerous." And I said, but the beach is there. He said, "Just follow me." So I ignored him, cut myself on this rock, and then literally climbed myself out over these boulders and cut my leg open. And I got on the beach eventually. And I looked like Freddy Krueger had attacked me. I had all this scarring. I had blood coming out my leg. And I stood on the beach, and there was national TV in Hawaii. I had a video camera in my face. And I thought, I better say something motivational now. And it would be like 17 hours, 2 minutes. And the problem was I had about 25 ulcers in my mouth, so I could barely speak. So anyway, the camera's in my face, and I went, "Pain lasts for a minute, success lasts for a lifetime." And it was very, very simple. Please don't try and find it on YouTube. I think it's been removed. It's very embarrassing. But it was done. It was finished. And, there's someone on the beach saying, "No, he doesn't have to go to hospital. He's surprisingly upbeat." But my stomach was just agony. And I tried 7 showers that night, because every time warm water, it stemmed the pain. I got out, it was agony again. And I tried to sleep, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat for 3 days. But I always say, imagine how much more painful that experience would have been if I didn't make it. But all history shows is that I made it. And then after that, all I thought was, nothing will stop me again. And in the interview, I said, I'll wait for a year to do the next one, which was the Catalina Straits, Catalina Island to mainland Los Angeles. And 3 months later, glutton for punishment, I'm back on the plane, ready to do the next one. Because I thought I'll try and get 2 in this year. But after the 17-hour swim, my shoulders sore, even though, my technique's really effective. So I'm back on the plane, back in the water. And the thing with the Catalina Channel is you have to start at midnight, and it's the Pacific Ocean. It's still the same ocean as Hawaii. So, you've got deadly marine life, you've got the sharks. And what I also should mention as well, when I got out in Hawaii, the kayaker came and he hugged me and he said, "Oh my God, I'm so glad you had that shark unit on," because he said, "There was a tiger shark surfing on the wave right next to you. That's why I wanted you to come sideways." I said, "Well, I cut my leg open on the rock." And he said, "Good job you had the shark unit on then." I said, "Well, it hasn't worked for the last hour." He said, "Oh, bloody hell," because it had run out of battery. So that was a little bit of a lesson. But yeah, going back to Catalina, started midnight, and I couldn't see my hand going in the water when I started. And for 6 hours I was in darkness. And that was pretty eerie when you think, what I went through in Hawaii with the stings, and you had to keep the devil at bay. And I got to 6 hours, the sun came up, it was really foggy, everyone was upbeat, and suddenly my shoulder packed in, the tendon had come undone, it had severed the attachment, and then I ended up swimming with one arm for 6.5 hours. But all I kept thinking when I was swimming with one arm was, it's not as bad as a Portuguese Man O War. So into perspective, Adam. And the fire service who were in the boat out in the ocean, I don't know whether they were doing some training or what, but they felt so sorry for me. They turned around and for the next 4.5 hours were cheering me on right alongside me, which was amazing. And 6.5 hours with one arm. But again, it wasn't as bad as that Man O War. So then, I finished another, and then I'm on to the fifth, which was Tsugaru Channel, Japan, 3 more to go. Problem is, the shoulder is in a bad way. I go back to see the surgeon, and he goes, "Oh God, not you again." He said, "You never did that Spain swim, did you?" And I was like, "Well, I did Spain, Hawaii." No, I never did the Spain swim. He said, "Because your shoulder is pretty bad, don't you?" I was like, yeah. I said, "Well, I've actually got 3 more swims to do." He was like, "What? Just give this up," type of thing. Anyway, I had the operation, and it turns out the tendon was no good at all. So they actually cut the fibre in the tendon, and were just advising me really to take it easy. Anyway, I had my operation, had the arm in a sling, got fit, and 9 weeks later, because I pre-booked the Japan swim before the operation, I only had 9 weeks to train. But the good thing about the Tsugaru Channel is it's 15 miles. It's one of the shorter ones. The bad news is it's the strongest currents in the world and can be waves from hell. But I'm thinking, well, I'm due for a bit of luck. I'm sure it'll go okay. Well, long story short, it took us 3 hours to get to the start line because the weather was so bad. And it should take an hour. And when we started, he says, "Look, it's going to be bad initially, but it should improve later on. But it could also be bad tomorrow. And I've got a 2-day window. I've only got 2 days to do it. Because then there's a relay booked, and there's only so few crossings a year with the pilots." So anyway, I decided to take it on. And after 4 hours of being sick constantly, I was sick at half an hour for 4 hours. And then the pilot looked at his monitor and he said, "The current is going 2 to 2 mile an hour west. If you don't swim faster then it's over." So then I said, "How long for?" And he said, "Well, half an hour initially." So I went as fast as I could at 4.5 hours, as fast as I possibly could. Then he would kind of lean over the boat and say, "Okay, back to normal pace." Went back to normal pace. Then 10 minutes later, fast as you can again for another half hour. This went on for 11.5 hours. And the waves were like, at one stage, at 10, 12-foot swells. I was riding up this wave. It was just ridiculous. So not only I had waves from hell and terrible conditions, I had to beat the current all the way through. And all I thought was, like I thought in that training session before the English Channel, small wins. Half an hour as fast as you can. Forget the whole swim. And I got more out of me that day than I ever have in my life in terms of fitness. My heart rate was going probably 185 for 11 hours, 185 beats a minute. But all I kept thinking was, you can make it, you can make it, you can make it. Power strong, power strong. And it's the first time ever that I've actually been concerned of having a heart attack, because I was really conscious of how, normally when I do these swims, there's that ultimate belief, but the ultimate belief was there, but I thought, can my heart take it? And even when I got to the last 2 miles, it took 3 hours to do the last 2 miles. So even when I thought I was finished, the waves were coming over, I was getting pushed backwards. And only the last 700 meters did the pilot say no current, after I'd cursed the ocean and said, "What have I done to deserve this? We both know I'll stay out here all day, all week. Just, you've proven a point, let me get in." And my girlfriend, who was on the boat, who gave me drinks, she said, "Who are you shouting at?" I was like, "Just the ocean. I'm just having a word with the ocean." Because I kept seeing the ocean as a person. It's like a best friend. If you got across it, then fantastic. But when it was making you suffer, it was like a big argument with your best mate. So I kept seeing it as a person. I think that kind of helped, really, to put it in that context, rather than, something that I wasn't in control of. If I saw it as a person, I was in control of it. Anyway, I managed to make it 15 hours, 31 minutes. and made it across. And after that, I kind of thought nothing will ever stop me again. It's plain sailing from here. And I was sore, recovered, and then booked the Cook Strait, and it was April 2014. And I wanted January because it was warmer. And I said to the pilot, can't I have January? And he said, no. I booked up with other things, and there's only a few slots, only 8 slots a year because it's so rough in the Cook Strait. April's the time. I said, well, no one's ever done it end of April. And he said, well, it's up to you. But all I thought was, no one's done it end of April because of the temperature. But I had the North Channel next, which was Ireland to Scotland, which is the coldest. So I thought, well, good training for the last one. So just do it the coldest. So anyway, 25-hour flight, 3 days later, I'm in the water. First 2 hours, everything's going great, no problem at all. I had to 2.5 hours, take some water on and start to vomit. I vomited constantly for half an hour, and I just felt so weak from the trip, and I think it was jet lag. And I was never going to quit, but I looked up at the sky. I said, oh, for God's sake, just give me something positive. What have I done to deserve this? Give me something positive. And then out of nowhere, I saw a fin coming flying towards me, and suddenly there was a load of fins and no Jaws music, and it turned out to be a pod of dolphins. And they wedged me in like a diamond shape. I had 2 underneath me, 2 at the side, 1 in front, like I was part of the pod. And I thought, God, what's this all about? Then I looked down and I saw a shark underneath. And I thought, right, you've got a choice. You either focus on the shark or you focus on the dolphins. I thought, focus on the dolphins, focus on the positive. Like I trained myself, to always look at the good rather than the bad. And my charity is whale and dolphin conservation as well. So it was kind of epic that potentially come to help me. But I didn't know what it was all about. And I looked at the shark, kept an eye on the shark, and then thought, focus on the dolphins. One kept circling me, touching me with its tail, which is a sign of sort of affection and looking after you as part of the pod. But there was always 2 with me. They never really left me. And even when I had a drink, and you can see it on YouTube if people want to Google Adam Walker swimming with dolphins, it's got around about 5 million views. Or even better, look at Adam Walker, all the footage, because it shows when I stop and have a drink, the dolphins stop. And then they continue when I continue. So this happened for an hour and a half until the pilot said, look, Adam, you're losing time because you're looking at dolphins. We've got 3 currents to get across. If you don't go any faster, you're not going to make it. So I said in my head, thanks, dolphins, for all your support, but I really must get on. And then within 2 seconds, bang, they were gone forever. So absolutely amazing, and something that will never leave me. And there's an incredible picture, actually, if you look on the internet, of the dolphin in midair. And as I say, if people want to see more, if they go to Adam Walker 32 on YouTube, you'll see a bunch of the videos. But pretty epic occasion for me, and worth all the pain and discomfort that I've gone through up to this point. And it felt like a bit of a sign, really, that someone was looking down on me, trying to support me. And I remember one stage I got a bit more confident, because after about an hour, the one in front of me was only 2 inches in front, and then a wave came over, and I thought, I'll try and swim faster and see if I can beat the dolphin. And the dolphin just did a little flick of its tail and was again 2 inches in front of me, as if to say, no, there's no way you're going to keep up with me. And some of them were like on their side, just watching me with their eye. It was just amazing. It's really hard to describe what an epic occasion, an amazing experience for me it was. And they got me through that moment until the shark disappeared, and then I carried on, and it gave me a new lease of life, and I powered on, and I managed to finish in 8 hours, 36 minutes, finished the Cook Strait, and that left me on to one more swim, which was North Channel, Ireland to Scotland, which is notoriously seen as the toughest ocean swim in the world because it's 13 degrees water temperature. But as I say, the Cook Strait was 13, 14 with colder air temperature. So I was kind of nicely set up. The other thing, just before I did Ireland to Scotland, I got a phone call from a director who'd worked with a great Jacques Cousteau on ocean swim, on marine life. And he said, in 25 years of working with marine life, he's never seen dolphins so kind of engaged with another human being. So he said, we want to do a film on dolphin intelligence called Conversations with Dolphins, where you host it and basically interview scientists on how intelligent they actually are. So we did that last year, and then it releases this year in October in Canada, and also in October in France, and then I'm sure it will go to other countries, but it's called Conversation with Dolphins. And then that led me on to, at this point, it's August 2014. It was April 2014. I did the Cook Strait to do the North Channel Island to Scotland. Trained in pretty cool temperatures. I did a few sessions in 4 degrees for half an hour, get myself used to it. So 13 felt warm. Now the challenge with the North Channel is they have lion's mane jellyfish, which are the biggest jellyfish in the world, tentacles up to 100 feet long. But a Portuguese Man O War has tentacles up to 100 feet long, because a Portuguese Man O War isn't actually a jellyfish. But when they sting you, they can shut down your organs and kill you. Whereas with a lion's mane, generally you have to be stung a number of times, but of course, they can kill you as well. But all I thought was they're not as bad as a Portuguese Man O War. Again, put it into perspective. Anyway, started that swim, first hour in. One point I was so barricaded in with lion's mane jellyfish, I had to swim back towards Ireland, and my crew was shouting, "Scotland's that way, Adam, is that way, why are you swimming backwards?" So I ended up swimming backwards to swim forwards, and they said, just ignore them, ignore the stings, but easier said than done. What I didn't realise is a lion's mane jellyfish can go upside down, the tentacles can go upwards and sting you, and when they die, they shed the tentacles, and the tentacles can still sting you. But again, I was thinking, just ignore it and power forward. But they're some horrendous looking, ugly things, a lion's mane jellyfish. Anyway, got a number of stings, but it was flat, the water. Now, ironically, the one time that I want it to be a little bit rougher, because the jellyfish come to the surface when it's flat. And bloody ocean gods give me flat water, so the jellyfish come to the surface. So it was like typical. I also had moon jellyfish, which don't really hurt much. They were bouncing off my head and shoulder and feet, but I realised they don't actually sting human beings, but I didn't know that at the time. And we have a whiteboard, and my girlfriend writes messages of, keep pushing, all this sort of stuff. And after one of my drinks, she just after the drink, she put a whiteboard, she drew a picture of a whale. And I thought she was saying, do it for the whales, Adam, do it for your charity. But what she was actually saying was, there's a whale next to you. So there's a pilot whale. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing it for the whales. I'm doing it for the whales. She goes, no, there's a whale next to you. I was like, yeah, I know, I'm doing it for the charity. Anyway, carried on. And my last swim in was surreal. There was a couple of boats out taking pictures. And those last 2 minutes of swimming, it was a disbelief what I'd done, that I'd managed to swim the toughest 7 ocean swims in the world, become the first British person, and become only 1 of 7 in the world to do it. But what I realised sort of after was it was so much more than just 7 swims. It was proof really to myself of what I could do and what was possible. Because I don't see myself as a born ocean swimmer. I'm 6'5", thin, the wrong size. People said I was going to die from being too thin because of the cold temperature, but I wanted to prove to them through acclimatization and having a strong mind, you could do it. You don't have to be small and eat lots of cake, which is sometimes the perception of the sport. You can do it in the right way, in a healthy way. But it just proved to me by taking that step over the line, watching that movie, what was possible. And as a result of that, doors open. I've done a documentary. I've written a book called Man vs. Ocean. And I believe everything's possible. I'm now ambassador of the Royal Ice Saving Society, so the anti-drowning charity, encouraging people to swim in Britain and globally, get them back in the water, because it's done so much for my sport. It has so many physical and mental benefits, but it's not as popular as some of the other sports. So that's kind of my quest now. But the biggest thing was not to fear failure. And for me, I used to look in the mirror and I didn't want to be second best. And had that fear of taking something on. But, because I was older, I thought, what's the worst thing can happen? Give something a go and you just might make it. don't be paralyzed by fear. And by doing that, I managed, with 3 operations on my left shoulder, 2 operations on my left knee, 2 dislocations, 1 operation on my right knee and a bad back. What is possible if you put your mind to it? So, yeah, amazing adventure and very, very grateful.
It's an incredible adventure and an incredible story. Yeah, the main thing that sort of sticks out for me is your mindset. You've got such a strong, focused mind, like a never say die attitude. And do you think it's the mindset that got you through these 7 swims?
I think the technique and the mind. So the technique, which people are calling the ocean walker technique, after me, Adam Ocean Walker, I think by being efficient in the water makes a big difference. But if you're efficient in the water and you don't have the right mindset, you're not going to make it. But if you have the right mindset, but you are really inefficient, you might not make it. The brain is very, very important in this whole process, absolutely. And but I think they go hand in hand. For me, my mind was, as you say, if I kept it simple in my mind, it became simple in reality. And when I came across these obstacles, whatever they were, I trained myself to overcome them and just to think it's not that bad. Play it down, play it down. Human beings, when you get in discomfort and pain, your brain goes, I'm in discomfort and pain, get me out of here. But once you realize you can get through that, and it gets easier. So for example, sickness, people say to me, oh my God, how are you sick and keep swimming? Well, that is actually normal for me now. But when I did it in the English Channel, it was like my brain, the first one, I'm finished. So then when I was sick in New Zealand, I was thinking, oh, come on, get it over and done with and let's get on with this swim. So it's interesting how when you haven't been experienced in that way, this is why training is so important, because the more you go through, rather than see it as a negative, see it as a positive, because actually you're developing your mind and making it stronger. So when you feel sick, when you feel tired, when your muscles are hurting, don't see that as a negative, see it as making you stronger every time if you overcome it. It's an obstacle to overcome. It's like life, isn't it? Great people who achieve whatever in business and doesn't even have to be sport. They've always had obstacles to overcome. They've either been bankrupt and haven't let that hold them back, and they've moved forward with it, with everything, because they've got that ultimate belief. Same with sport. Whatever you go through, everything is possible. But you have to train your mind to do that. So when you're out there and you've got sharks and man o' war and rough seas and you've got to beat the current, tide, etc., you have ultimate belief in yourself, because you realize by not having ultimate belief and by letting the pain in, it's not going to do you any good. We all know it's there. You just try and bypass it in your mind. And that's what I try to do, bypass it by thinking positively.
If you could give some advice to someone who's considering doing one of these swims, like the English Channel, for example, what advice would you give someone who's contemplating wanting to do one of these swims?
I would say, twofold really. Get your technique right in terms of making you more efficient, and then get your mindset right. As I say, for me, seeing a hypnotherapist was great. It really made a difference. I saw a guy called Clem Turner, who lives near me in Sutton Ashfield, Nottingham. Very, very great, positive guy. He can really help with the mind. I listen to a lot of motivational CDs and positive things, and really just to get in that positive mindset, realize by being negative or allowing people to bring you down. So people saying, aren't you worried of this or worried about that? Rather than go along with it and say, well, yeah, I am, and hopefully I'll make it, or hopefully this, or potentially I'll make it, or maybe. Just talk positive. Even if you don't, in your heart of hearts, believe at that point, by talking that way, you start to believe it. So working on your mind is really, really important. That comes with training, going through these different things. So, build up gradually. Start by doing 10 minutes in open water, get up to half an hour, get up to an hour. Make sure people are watching you and you're safe. That's really important. But then build up gradually, get used to the feeling of the water. And then you can build up to the 6 hours. Once you can do 6 hours, you can swim any of these swims. Then it just becomes the mind pushing you, pushing the body. Because if the mind's in the right place, the body will react. But if the mind's not in the right place, you'll convince yourself the body can't react. So, it's about slowly getting into it. But remember, I hadn't done anything for nearly 10 years, and I didn't swim front crawl, I didn't swim long distance, and within 18 months, I went from nothing to swimming the English Channel.
Now, just on success, how do you define success?
Being happy, I've realised that I thought by being successful, i.e., being a director or being high up in my sales world, and I work for different sales companies, I thought that was the pinnacle. And when I became a director of sales, I realised I was miserable because I wasn't doing what was in my heart. And actually, after the sixth swim, I gave up the sales job, to pursue, my dream of pushing the coaching. And for me, I thought, well, if I'm doing these talks telling people to fulfill their dreams, and I'm doing a job that I don't want to do, then, I have to be true to myself. So I gave up the job and used the same drive that I did in the ocean swims. And actually now I'm coaching around the world this technique, so it shows it pays off with the right mindset. But for me, it's about being happy. Ask yourself what you want out of life. I wrote down, what is my dream? My dream was I want to swim the English Channel. I put it at the side of my bed. I looked at it every night before I went to bed. I looked at it in the morning. It became part of me. And actually the job became secondary, the sales job. Whenever I went to meetings, I was thinking, great, I can go to London. After that's finished, I can train. I was always trying to find training spots to keep that going. That became the job, and the actual job became secondary to it. But it was giving me something that life wasn't. And I have a lot to be grateful of. So find out what it is, work really hard to do it. Don't let anybody put you down. Don't put yourself down, and just ultimately believe that you can make it happen. And sometimes you can think, well, how am I going to do that? Well, actually, if you keep pushing and keep working at it, everything's possible.
Well, it's a fascinating insight into your mind and, your approach to life and overcoming, the struggles with these long distance swims. You've mentioned your YouTube channel. Was it Adam Walker 32?
That's right, yeah. So I've got swim stroke videos. I've got some of my clips of my talks. So, for stroke technique and for a bit of a motivational boost, you can check that out and subscribe. And I'm updating all the time now with more videos. So, yeah.
And also your new book, Man vs. Ocean, that's available on Amazon.
So Man vs. Ocean, if you go to my website, which is www.adamwalkeroceans with an S, number 7.co.uk. So adamwalkeroceans7.co.uk. As a thank you, I'm signing every book ordered from my website. So I'll personally sign it, and you can ask me whatever message, or you can just leave me to do an inspirational message. So that's the website. And also on that website, you can find out about my motivational speaking and the coaching. And then I have also one dedicated to the swim technique, which is oceanwalkeruk.com. As I say, I'm doing swim camps. So I do swim camps around the world this year: New Zealand, Morocco, Turkey, etc. I'm going to America next year. We'll be going to Australia as well. And this way of swimming is really, if you have any injury problems, any issues, this solves that problem in terms of the shoulder, because I'm basically working within the shoulder range. I've had it medically approved by doctors, surgeons, and osteopaths to say you're working within the range of the body. And just check it out, because it's, I know I'm biased with it, but it's been life-changing for me, and other swimmers are getting faster, more efficient. What I'm actually doing in October is I'm opening up to swim coaches. So if there's any people interested, I'm actually going to be doing a license with it where people can become qualified ocean walker swimmers. It's called the Ocean Walker Technique. But check it out. And as I say, feel free to email me as well, which is info@oceanwalkeruk.com if you've got any questions about it. But, I believe it's the most efficient way of going. If you want to do triathlons, Ironman, long distance, anything over sort of 400 meters in open water, or even 100 meters, really, to be fair. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll put all those links in the show notes. Yeah, congratulations on your book that was released, was it earlier this year? Is that when it came out? January?
Yeah, it came out in January. And what was great was I had a good couple of weeks of the number one best-selling sport biography on Amazon, because it is on Amazon as well. And it was nice because obviously in this country, football or soccer is such a big sport, and there's, running and all the others. So to leapfrog all those was a big win for open water swimming, because obviously it's still a relatively small sport, in the context of sport. So it gave me a lot of hope, because I see myself as an ambassador for the sport of trying to bring it forward, because it did so much for my life. So I think, my task is to really give back in that way.
Yeah, so I just want to say thanks again for coming on to the podcast, and good luck with everything in the future. But before we go, is there like one parting piece of advice you could give listeners, with their own journey and their own sort of goals, and that they can maybe take away and implement in their own journey?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is believing in yourself, number one, that you can do whatever you set out to do. And let me tell you, for a guy who's had 5 operations on his body, a bad back, all these different physical issues, which basically meant that I was finished in sport, but turned out I wasn't finished in sport. Everything really is possible. And it doesn't even have to be sport. It can be any, whatever you want to do in your life. But what I've realized now, and every day is fantastic for me now, because I'm like a child. And lots of exciting things kind of come into my life, because when you're positive and when you succeed, lots of good things then come in. But if you don't push those barriers, and sometimes it's easier to play it safe, but actually by playing it safe, you're never going to get to the level that you want to go. And if you really want to reach for the stars with it, and do exactly what you want to do and push those boundaries, you're going to have to be in a little bit of discomfort. Maybe that's physically, maybe that's mentally, maybe it's working a little bit harder than you would like. But, we have one life. What do you want to be? That's what I would say. What is it that you want to be before you go to the grave? And, someone once said to me that there's a lot of people out there who go to the grave who were very, very talented, but we never knew what their talents were, because they didn't allow themselves to open up to it. For me, I don't know what my other talents are. I've done ocean swimming. Am I a born ocean swimmer? No. I just chose to do it in that period of my life for 8-9 years. But I believe there's other things out there for me. You've just got to have the right mentality. And with the right mentality, you can't fail. You can only succeed. So, yeah, that's my message to you.
All right. Thanks again, Adam. And good luck with everything in the future.
Brilliant. And just also for Twitter, if anyone wants to follow me on Twitter, it's at AdamsOceans7. So Adams with an S, Oceans with an S, number 7. And also I've got an Instagram account as well. So I'm constantly updating, giving tips on coaching, and also some motivational message. So it'd be great to see you on there.
Yep, no worries. Yeah, well, I'll put those links as well in the show notes. But thanks again for coming on. And it's been fascinating.
No worries.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes. Give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.